All right. Hello, everybody. Leon coming to you here from Back Intelligence. And today we have a special interview with Linda Mintle, who wrote the book Living Beyond Pain, which I've read. I actually have it right here. I've made some videos about some of the topics that you covered in the book, specifically already on our YouTube channel. But I wanted to have her on to kind of talk a little bit more specifically about chronic pain and pain management. So welcome, Linda.
Very good to be here. And let's just give a shout out to my co-author, who is a doctor of osteopathic medicine, Dr. James Cribbs. He and I wrote this book together, and I was really interested in the non-pharmacological treatments to dealing with chronic pain. And he, as an osteopathic physician, also uses a lot of OMT. I don't know how familiar your audience is with osteopathic manipulative treatment, but it is a type of treatment where they really deal with the musculoskeletal system, using their hands to manipulate, and can actually do quite a bit with pain. So it was great to have him as a co-author as well.
All right, awesome. And yeah, maybe we could touch on OMT at some point as well. You could tell us more about it. Yeah, and tell us a little bit about yourself real quick.
So I've been a practicing therapist for lots of years, over 25 years, seeing all kinds of patients in the area of mental health. So I have a couple of licenses as a marriage and family therapist, clinical social worker, also have a PhD in clinical psychology and urban health. I am a chair at a medical school of behavioral health, so I'm training physicians, future physicians, in terms of the area of addiction and pain management. And this is part of what we were doing. I live in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We were looking a lot at trying to figure out, what do future physicians need to know about pain and addiction, because their training wasn't always so geared to that. So we decided that we would look at all the different treatments, and this is part of what prompted us towards a book, because we were reading all the reviews of everything from acupuncture to cannabis to, biofeedback, and all the different ways that people manage pain, nerve blocks, injections, just so many treatments, and trying to give people just a really good understanding of what chronic pain is, what you have to know to treat it, and how you can really improve your function and the quality of life. And Leon, that is the biggest thing I want to say to pain patients, is that it may not be realistic to ever completely get rid of all pain. But what we really do try to do in this field is try to increase a person's function, get them functioning and back into their everyday life as much as possible, and improve that quality of life with the types of treatments that we do.
Nice, great, yeah. I think, yeah, what you said there is, sometimes you hear in certain people say things like, just do 1, 2, 3 and get rid of your pain, but it's not that it's not that simple. It's a lot more complex than that. Yeah.
Yeah, chronic pain is a very complex thing when you teach it to students, with all the pain pathways, what happens in the brain. The brain is very much involved in this, as the central nervous system is. And there is this phenomena that happens with chronic pain. So let's just kind of back up. So I'm sure you've had lots of conversations with people with the difference between acute and chronic pain. So acute pain is usually when there's an injury, there's some neuropathic type of pain or inflammatory pain. I'm going to talk in those general things, something we call nociceptive pain, where there's an injury and somebody hurts themselves. I'm not going to talk so much about cancer pain, because that is a very different type of thing to treat. But generally speaking, when you have an injury, you heal within about 3 months. I mean, that is a long period of time where healing, depending on the type of injury and the severity of the injury, obviously. But when pain goes beyond that, and it's really more of a time frame of what happens to a person in pain, that it heals, but the pain continues. And so you have this ongoing pain. What happens in the body, in very simplistic terms, and again, it's very complicated when you're studying all of this, but basically what happens is your perception of pain is actually in your brain. So that's something that's, we like to say the bane of pain is mainly in the brain, okay? Because your perception, how you perceive pain is there. But in this process of these upward and downward pain pathways, there are lots of things that modulate pain, make it worse, make it better. And what happens to a person in chronic pain is that their central nervous system becomes what we call sensitized. So it's almost like if you think of being on a highway and you've gone over this highway a number of times, you go faster and faster and faster, and you know that pathway really quickly. That's what happens with chronic pain is there's this misfiring of the alarm system in your brain that says, yes, you're in pain. And your system is sensitized to that pain. So you might feel it more, you might feel it easier than somebody else. You have it, you're not making it up. It actually is a phenomenon of what's happening. But because of this sensitization of the nervous system, a lot of what we have to do in treatment is learn to calm down our nervous system and then rewire that perception of pain in the brain. And a lot of the techniques and the things that we're going to talk about do those two things. They work on calming the central nervous system, and they work on changing the perception of pain in the brain so that the brain is not misfiring all the time.
Yeah, and I like the analogy that you use in the book with the fire alarm that keeps
Yeah,
going off even
yeah.
when there is no fire. I think that's a great analogy for what chronic pain is. So you would define chronic pain as somebody who's having pain longer than 3 months, and assuming that their tissues already have healed.
Right. Longer than what you would expect in terms of that the injury is maybe healing, it's already healed, or it should not be continuing for whatever reason, and yet it does. It continues. And again, I want to say it's very real. It's not like people are making this up in their head. And a lot of times pain patients get accused of that, saying you're just making this up, or it's just psychosomatic or something in your head. Well, there is a psychological component, but it's the way it interconnects with all the different systems and pathways in your body. There are certain things that make pain worse and certain things that really calm down pain. And that was really a focus in the book. What turns up the volume on pain, and then what turns down that volume? So what are the things that you can do as a person in pain? And I tell you, I wish I knew this because I had an accident a number of years ago. I used to be an ice skater, and I grew up in Michigan, and we skated after school every day. It was just something that everybody did. I went back a number of years later with my kids in tow, and I was demonstrating to them a flying camel. And it had been years since I had done this, and I took a horrible fall on the ice and injured my back really badly. And it went on and on and on with the pain, and the pain became so unbearable over the months that I couldn't sleep. I could hardly stand. I was having difficulty functioning on a daily basis. And all I could think about was my pain because it was so intense and it was unrelenting pain. Fortunately for me, in some ways, I could not tolerate opioids. So I was given that prescription, but I couldn't tolerate them. It made me sick. The drugs made me sick. So I was desperately looking for other things to do to try to deal with my own pain. So I have great compassion for people that have pain. And in my case, I did have a microdiscectomy, which did help a lot relieve that pain. But I now know, based on all the research I did for this book, I know a lot of things I could have done differently to really have made my life much more enjoyable during that time, and even functional during that time, had I understood the different things that we talk about in the book.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, and in your case, it seems like the surgery worked well. I think for a lot of people, surgery shows that it doesn't work.
Right, right.
Yeah, the
Yeah, it's
research
very,
shows. Yeah.
yeah, it's very difficult. But I tell you what brought me out of it, what really was the difference. And I did have this experience where I had the surgery done. It was a L5, L4, L5 bulging disc on my sciatic nerve, which is why there was so much pain, because it was literally sitting on there. And I had to have surgery because I was told if I didn't, I would potentially be incontinent. So it was really kind of a good motivator for me to try the surgery. But what was so striking to me was that after I had the surgery, I was given no post-operative instructions. I had the surgery. I had to wear this girdle type of thing for months, and walk around and try to heal. And I thought, this is crazy. I felt like I was 90 years old. I couldn't even move. And so then I started looking into exercise and Pilates. Really, I had a daughter. We were sharing before we got on here. You as a dancer, I had a daughter who's a dancer, and so I was very familiar with Pilates. And I started doing Pilates very gradually under the supervision of an exercise physiologist who understood movement. And it's really what brought me back to health, I have to say, with a lot of other things that I was doing, that had I not had those Pilates and the different things that I knew from the research in the book, I don't know if my recovery would have been that great, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Yeah, yeah, and we'll talk about some of the modalities and stuff like that that you talk about in the book. Um, no, so the one thing you do stress in the book is the importance of taking a multidimensional approach, a holistic approach to treating your pain. Can you tell us why that's so important?
Well, there's so many factors that influence your pain perception in the brain. So everything from the way you think to how you feel, to the stress in your life, to the relationships that you have, to the way your body is, the anatomy of your body, everything influences your pain. And we use this story in the book. My co-author is very into, his wife was very into the Tour de France, which, if people aren't aware of it, is a very big bicycle race that happens every year. And it's this huge, huge event. And in that race, they go 23 miles, I believe it is. I think it's 23 miles in that race. Well, for years and years and years, the British team never won the race. And they were getting really tired of losing. So they hired this new coach who came out of the business world. And he brought this concept from the business world called marginal gains to the Tour de France race. And what this was about was, he looked at the process of riding a bike in that race. And he broke it down into all the components: how the handlebars are, what the pedals look like, the color of the bike, the seats that the riders sat on, the number of, the way the clothing that they had. I mean, every little aspect of riding the bike that you could imagine. And his goal was, if we can change 1% every day of what we do riding this bike, eventually we're going to win that race. And they actually did that. They never won any of the legs, but they actually won the race. And he credits it from these 1% changes that he made, which ended up making a huge difference. Well, when we heard that story, we thought, that's just like chronic pain. If you make these 1% changes in your life, small changes in very different parts of your life, the end result of that is that you're going to come away with a much better functioning and quality of life in your life. There's so much you can do. So that's why we're saying you have to pay attention to everything from the type of diet that you eat, which can really influence your pain, to the type of treatments that you get from a physician that would be very specific to maybe a nerve block or injections or even opioids at times, to, you know, lifestyle changes, to the way that you psychologically deal with yourself. So all of these things are important. You have to take a whole person approach to treating chronic pain.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And I think, yeah, there's a big emphasis in your book on psychological health in relation to treating one's pain. And I think this is something that we talk about on our YouTube channel that I think a lot of people don't. Like, a lot of people just just give exercises, just the physical component only. And I think there is a lot of research that's showing psychological health, stress, your emotions, your thoughts, all affect your perception of pain as well. And so we really also preach a holistic approach. And I agree with you. It's so important that you tackle it from all the different angles
Right.
rather than just one. Yeah.
If pain perception is in your brain and that's what you're trying to change, so you're trying not to have that perception continuing to misfire and tell you there's pain when the pain isn't there, right? Or the pain needs to be calmed down so that it can eventually take a different pathway in the brain, right? So part of what we're trying to do is we're trying to take attention away from pain. And this is a really critical idea when you're starting to think about psychologically, what can you do? What we don't think about, Leon, is that the more attention we give to pain, the more the brain says, oh, this is important. Pay attention to that. And we go into that fight or flight response of stress. Because when you're in pain, and again, I know this firsthand, you begin to think, oh, my pain is terrible. I can't function. I can't get out of bed. What am I going to do? All those catastrophic thoughts that you begin to have about your pain tells the brain, focus on it, that's important, and yes, you're going to have pain. So a lot of the techniques and the things that we do is we're distracting the brain away from pain so that we can extinguish those pathways that keep telling us that the pain is bad. So we're changing the brain, we're rewiring the brain away from the pain. Again, not saying that it's not real, but we're changing our relationship that we have with the pain so that we turn down the volume on that pain.
Yeah, yeah, and we'll get into maybe some specific strategies in a bit. But let's talk about let's touch a little bit on opiates first,
Okay.
because there was an entire chapter in your book about opiates and the misuse of it. So many people overdose on opiates. Um, Tell us a little bit more about what they are, what they do, and why they're problematic.
Well, they're a class of drugs that can be very effective for pain management. And they're naturally found in the poppy plant, as most people probably know. Some of them are made directly from the plant. Some of them are synthetically made. We don't have to get into all the different chemical structures, but they relax the body and they relieve pain. And one of the other things that they do is that they do create some euphoria, right? So people do feel a high or a sense of euphoria when they take them, which is one of the reasons why they can be so misused. Now, what happened if we go back and we look at the history of when OxyContin came on the market in 1996, when that was first introduced? There was a really important article that came out in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is very well respected, that basically said they didn't think these opioids were addictive. Well, we now know that that was totally wrong. And they were really encouraging doctors, Big Pharma was really encouraging doctors to push these narcotics on their pain patients. And it was to the point where you couldn't get your hospital accredited or your practice, sort of sanctioned by the people that you need to have doing certain things if you weren't prescribing these medications, because they were saying you have to get a pain score from a patient, which now we know is a really not so good idea, because again, we're giving attention to the pain rather than moving away from the pain. But it was kind of like, if you don't take the pain scores down, then you're going to get sort of nicked or sanctioned or something else is going to happen. So they were really pushing these opioids without really understanding the highly addictive nature of these drugs. I do want to make a point to the listeners that and our viewers, that not everybody who takes opioids for pain management is an addict. Please understand that there are people that work with their physicians. These can be life-saving for some people in terms of helping them deal with their life. So there are people who are using them. They're not misusing them. We've got so many now regulations around pain management so that post-surgery, you're not getting a whole bottle of pills anymore. It's regulated. We can tell who's prescribing, so that people have less and less likelihood of going from one prescriber to another to get the meds, because there's a monitoring system now. There's all kinds of safeguards that have been put into the system and regulation. And certainly physicians understand very well how addictive these drugs can be. But I do want to say that not everyone who uses an opioid is going to become an addict. We know that about 40 to 60% of addiction is genetic, so that there are people who are much more prone to addiction than others. And that is something you don't know until you take a substance and you find out. It's a little bit like playing roulette, right? You don't really know if you're that person. You can know a little bit if you look back at your family history and you see if there are people that have addiction in your family history. You're probably more predisposed to an addiction based on that. But they're effective drugs when they're used correctly. However, a lot of people would prefer to take a pill than do the hard work that we're going to talk about in changing your relationship with pain. The good news is that medications treat symptoms, but they don't get at the root problems. They don't get at what is causing the pain always, and how you can change your life to get to either get rid of the pain sometimes or actually minimize the pain in your life. So it's interesting that we're in a society where we like to pop a pill for a lot of things. So it's harder to do the work, I think, that is very effective, that doesn't involve opioids. There are a number of treatments, but I don't think a lot of people know about it. So I appreciate a podcast like yours, who's making people much more aware of the non-pharmacological treatments that we have for chronic pain that are evidence-based, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. I think what you said there is exactly right. Taking pills is a short-term remedy just to make you feel better, but it's not going to. It's not actually going to fix the cause, and it's not going to give you that long-term result. And can make you also drowsy, right? It can also affect your function in life as well. It's like drinking alcohol, right? Like you can, if you keep drinking alcohol, it make you feel great, but can you really go and exercise on with alcohol? You probably can't. So you have to, or it's not going to be very effective. And same with the opiates, it could make you actually be less active in a way, right?
Right. And one of the problems with opioids, because they are a narcotic, is that you build a tolerance to the drugs as well. And then you need more of the drug to get the same effect. And so when that happens, there are a lot of side effects with opioids. You mentioned, the drowsiness, but also constipation and other things that happen when you take those drugs. And a lot of people, what happens is they start using them, but then they become addicted to the medicines, and then they're taking them to avoid the withdrawal, which is very unpleasant. And so there was a book that was written called Dope Sick. I don't know if you've ever read it, but it's a wonderful account of the whole opioid epidemic, how it started, what happened. And one of the reasons it's called that is because once you get hooked on these opioids, it's when you go off of them, the withdrawal is so awful, you get dope sick. That's kind of the terminology for that. And so you take the medicine not to get euphoric, but you take it to prevent the withdrawal symptoms and prevent yourself from actually feeling really, really ill. So it's a vicious cycle that people can get into and find themselves in, not functioning the way that they want to function.
Yeah, yeah. And so people really should look at opiates if they're going to use it. It's almost better for them to know ahead of time that it is kind of like alcohol or even smoking cigarettes in a way that you could get easily addicted to it. And if you stop using it, you'll have to go through withdrawals. I'm talking about excessive amounts of alcohol.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 But you're priming the brain for an addictive substance, no matter what the addictive substance is. Whether it's alcohol, nicotine, cannabis, whatever. And we are now seeing that if you are using any type of substance, it goes through the same pathways in the brain, these dopamine pathways that create that reward feeling and then drug seeking feeling. And what happens eventually in addiction is that the feeling part of your brain, it's called the amygdala, the limbic system of your brain, it actually takes over this part of your brain in the front called the prefrontal cortex that is the thinking and the executive function of your brain. So the part of your brain that's able to say, oh, you've had too much of that drug, stop now. And instead, what happens is the feeling part takes over and it says, you need it, you're craving it, get it at all costs. And that's why when people are struggling with an addiction, we always say, why are they using such bad judgment? And why are they doing things that they normally wouldn't do? It's because of what happens in the brain, and that process begins to take over the thinking part of the brain. And then it's very difficult to stop because you're craving so intensely. And so there is evidence to show that if you take any substance, you're kind of priming the brain towards addiction. And so we have to be careful with anything that we put like that in our bodies.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Let's move on from the opiates. I think let's talk a little bit about some of the psychological interventions, because we already talk a lot about exercise and all this stuff on our channel. I mean, maybe we'll get into that as well. But there's a few chapters about your thoughts and your emotions and how that can affect pain perception. Can you just tell us, I mean, you did tell us a little bit already about it, but can you tell us why our emotions and thoughts are so tied to the pain that we perceive?
Mhm. Well, let me back it up and start with beliefs, because that is what triggers our thoughts. So there's a model that I teach students where your beliefs, how you see the world. So if you believe that pain can never go away, or I can never get better than where I am today, that's a belief, right? It's a negative belief that you have about the world. Those beliefs then trigger your thoughts, and we call those automatic thoughts. So I'm never going to get better, I'm never going to get out of this horrible pain state. Then my thoughts are going to be very negative. So when I wake up, oh, today is a bad day, just like every day, I'm going to have this negative thought. Then that negative thought, because I'm doing a circle here kind of visually, so beliefs up here, assumptions about the world, trigger our thoughts. Those thoughts then trigger our emotions. So if I'm thinking it's going to be a bad day, well, how am I going to feel? I'm going to feel crummy and sad, maybe depressed, maybe hopeless. Okay. Then those emotions trigger the way I behave. So then I'm going to go, I'm just going to stay in bed. I'm not going to, could call anybody, and maybe we isolate more and we don't do the things that we normally do. And then that all affects our perception. And where is pain? It's the perception in your brain. So all of these things, beliefs, thoughts, emotions, behavior, impact your perception. And so we have to look at all parts of that circle. You can intervene with your emotions by doing things to help your emotional state. You can intervene with your behavior, and we'll talk about each of these. But mainly what we start with is looking at this broad concept of beliefs. You have to have some hope, and you have to find some meaning in pain at times. You have to be able to not make always negative assumptions about the world, like doctors are out to get me, or nobody's going to help me, there's never a person in my life who can help me. If you have that negative belief, you really have to work on changing your beliefs. And I think in the book, I think I put a note here that I identified 10 of those. No, those were the thoughts, not the beliefs, but there's a lot of beliefs that I identified in the book that really lead you to a negative thought state. So the thoughts that often come then are, nothing can be done to make my pain better, I can't cope with my pain, I have no control, I'm not going to make it, my body is betraying me, it's defective, it isn't fair. Well, where's that going to take you? That's not going to take you to a positive state of your emotions. I can't do anything, I'm a burden. A lot of people feel they're a burden, so they isolate. I'm weak, I'm useless. All of those type of thoughts then, and especially what we know is that catastrophic thoughts. So those things like, I can't do anything, it's going to be a horrible day. Those are what we call catastrophic, because it's like an all or nothing. It's just going to be terrible. We know that those type of thoughts turn up the volume on pain. So literally changing your thought process to something like, yeah, I hurt this morning, but I can get out of bed if I take my time, or today maybe is going to be a better day than yesterday. I'm not being unrealistic, but I'm making my thought more positive, more hopeful, and more in the in the direction of I am going to be able to do something about my pain, right? So if you begin to change your thoughts, then what's going to happen is your emotions are going to change. So the more positive my thoughts are of I can, it might take time. I'm going to try this. And, it hurts at first, but I know I'm going to get better. So, oh, today I need to be grateful. And there's a whole chapter on gratefulness and what gratefulness does. And when you have grateful thoughts, it actually absolutely turns down the volume on pain. So then when you change your thoughts, you can also change your emotions. So if you're depressed, you're going to have more pain. Depression causes pain. We know that in our depressed patients, in my depressed patients, their pain indexes went way up. We know that if you treat the depression, the pain goes down. Pain can also cause depression, right? So you can be in a lot of chronic pain, and dealing with it day in and day out can cause you to feel depressed. So you have to work on the depression. And one of the best things that you can do to make your pain better is to treat your depression. So looking at that, to treat sadness and grief. If you're going through grief reactions, your pain is probably going to increase during those negative states. So what you want to do is work through those negative states, but then work on ways to incorporate more positive emotions into your life. And then the same is true with the behavior that you do. We don't always feel like doing something. So when you're in chronic pain, you don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to go out and meet somebody for dinner because you're just not sure how you're going to feel. But if you actually activate yourself to do it, all the research shows that you will actually feel better by making yourself do it. So these are things that they take a little time to work on. You have to work on your thoughts. You have to work on your emotions. You might have to go see a mental health professional like someone like me and get some work and help. But this is what really seems to work with people is looking at your thoughts, looking at your emotional states, and then acting in ways that are positive where your emotions will catch up later and will actually have an increase in terms of making you feel better and decreasing the volume on that pain perception.
Nice. I like that. Yeah, that's really good. I love it's like a neuroscience lesson.
Yeah, it's not hard though to think about. If you really
It's
just
not.
common sense,
Yeah.
the way I think is going to affect the way I feel, is going to affect the way I behave, and it's going to
Yeah.
impact the way I see the world, my perceptions.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, and I'm into all that stuff too. I like neuroplasticity and stuff like that, and how you can rewire your
Yeah.
brain by repeating certain behaviors and certain thoughts and working on even becoming aware of your belief systems. And I think the same thing that we do to achieve our goals or to become a certain kind of person, we should be applying the same thing to how we manage our pain,
Mhm.
right?
Right. A lot of times what I will do with a patient is I'll have them do a little chart because people aren't aware. So part of it is becoming aware of a lot of times people say, I don't think I'm that negative. And I say, well, let's see what happens when you start to think about your pain. I want you to write down on a piece of paper what was happening right before it. Like what was happening, what were you thinking, what did you feel, and what did you do? So a really simple chart of what did you think, what did you feel, what did you do? And then I have what's the situation? Because sometimes pain is worse when you're around certain people or when you're in certain places or whatever. And you all of a sudden patients will come back a week or two later and go, wow, there's a pattern here. Every time I think this catastrophic thought, I have more pain. And so they start connecting the dots and saying, yeah, my emotions, my thoughts, and my behavior are all connected. And if I can work, and we can work on any parts of that or all parts of that at once. But remember those marginal gains we're talking about. So even just making your thoughts more positive can make a huge difference. Or deciding I'm going to get some help for my depression and I'm going to work on, I'm going to go see somebody. Maybe I'll get on an antidepressant or something that might help me, or I'm going to do some things in my lifestyle to change to make the depression better. And that can make all the difference in a person's pain perception and take down that volume.
Yeah, 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 man, that makes sense. Do you think so? Would you say that journaling is also something that could be helpful for someone for a chronic pain sufferer? Just journaling every day about to become more aware, as well as to uh, reframe some things.
As long as the journaling is on the positive. So where I would rather have people land with journaling, and this has been done in big organizations like Google and all kinds of organizations and businesses have found the power of using gratitude. So if you wake up in the morning and you write down 3 things from the last 24 hours, and they need to be specific. So not, I'm just grateful for life, that's not, but I'm really grateful that my wife, you know, um, was able to enjoy a movie with me last night. It can be something innocuous like that. But when you force the brain to think about gratitude and you write 3 things every 24 hours of what you're grateful for, in big companies, they have found that productivity goes up, creativity goes up, people feel better, it improves their well-being. Well, there's a whole chapter on gratitude in the book about counting your blessings. It sounds, again, very basic, but it does something to the perception of pain when you do that. Gratitude journaling makes a big difference in the life of pain patients. In the same way with when you get up in the morning, pain talk. I have a little section in there about pain talk, where if you're constantly with your partner talking about how bad you feel and how bad it is, remember, you're focusing the brain on the negative, and the brain is going to go negative and make you feel negative. So you want to focus away from that. You want to focus on, yesterday I had a really great day. I was thinking about what worked well yesterday, what seemed to come together for me. And, I'm hoping for more days like that. I would rather have a person get up in the morning and say, hey, how is your day today? Not how is your pain today, but how is your day? How is it going? And then have this conversation where you're focusing on what went well during the day. It's an old concept that we actually borrowed from parent training back in the day. I used to work with kids in residential institutions, and we found if you catch them being good, rather than always commenting on their negative behavior, kids do better. Well, take that concept to pain. Catch yourself being good, not necessarily good, but catch yourself in a positive moment and in a grateful moment, in a moment where you can say, this part of my day went really well, or I had this really positive interaction with my boss today. I feel really good about that. Um, if you can do that over and over, there's even research that shows if you can start your day sending one positive text message or one positive email to someone thanking them for something, your entire day is going to go better.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, so it's like reinforcing the positive.
Right.
Yeah, I think that that is very useful. I think what happens, and I do this as well. Sometimes I have a lot of knowledge of how to properly hinge and bend down and all that kind of stuff. But like 2 years ago, I was lifting a heavy fridge and I threw out my back. Even though I know everything about how to do it right. So we all falter. And I just remember, like, but in my case, I knew, okay, I'm gonna ice for a day or two. I'm gonna do self-massage. I know kind of what I'm doing, so that empowers me already. That's also a psychological thing.
Mhm.
But also, I was doing the whole thing that you're talking about, which is I wasn't focusing so much on the pain, and I was trying to find, like, I'm like, okay, this is day one, this is what I'm doing, and today I don't feel great. That's like, you don't want to lie to yourself
Right.
completely,
Right.
right? That's because you're just fabricating. You're not going to believe it. So, but today I'm doing better than I was doing yesterday. So just that kind of reframe,
Mhm.
or just that feeling like I'm progressing can be huge. And then a few days later, oh, I definitely, look, it's not perfect, but it's definitely better than it was 5 days ago. And if people can do that with their chronic pain or even their acute pain when it comes, I think that can make a huge difference, right?
Yeah, and one of the therapy principles I used to use, and it really applies to pain as well, is I would have people tell me, even in addiction, they have a relapse, and so then they're all just like, oh my gosh, I here I am back to square one. Well, you're not really back to square one, because you had moments of sobriety, maybe days, maybe weeks, maybe months. So there was a period. So instead of picking apart what went wrong and how bad you are, why don't we focus on when you were sober? What were you doing that made that work? So the same thing, when you're having a day of less pain, what's different about that day? Is it your attitude? Is it your mood? Are you eating better on that day? Did you make yourself get up and move more during that day? Did you call a friend and actually have some social connection, which is one of the things that calms down the nervous system, by the way? And we're trying to calm our central nervous system down. All of those little 1% marginal gains, if you can go back and sort of analyze what you did on a good day, you can use that information then on a not so good day. And again, you're being very authentic. You're not sticking your head in the sand and, like you said, not making things up. But it's easy to slip into that negativity. It really is. And I think
Yeah.
that is the trick. So sometimes it helps to have people around you say, hey, remember what you're trying to work on? Maybe a cue from somebody in your environment to say, you're doing it, and flip the switch, and go the other direction.
Yeah, and hopefully those people in your environment are supporting you, because
Yes.
that's also very important. Your relationships and stuff like that. I like what you said also, when you get up, you know, having somebody ask you how's your day instead of how's your pain.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah,
Focusing
that's
away from the attention to pain. So the brain is not going to be, if I say, how's your pain? The brain's going, ooh, this is important. Got to pay attention to this. And then it makes the pain go up. So
yeah,
I always like to think of it like like a military person. I'm giving attention to pain, and I want to take that attention away and distract it into something else. A lot of mindfulness practices, Leon, are built on the distracting the brain away from the pain and getting focused on the breath. This is all distraction. This is what hypnosis, I'm trained in hypnosis as well. Hypnosis is really selective attention. It's training the brain away from the issue at hand and really trying to bring it into a calm, safe type of place. So very
yeah.
similar, I'm moving the attention away from the pain.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Let's touch. I guess we kind of covered already a lot of the emotional thoughts, beliefs, how they all work together, and some of the things that I think we've given people a good amount of ideas of how they can start working on that. Um, let's just touch a little bit like on the importance of exercise and movement and staying active. When you are in chronic pain.
Yeah, which is the thing you don't want to do, right? So it's small movements, getting yourself up and moving. And one of the things I would see, especially with maybe older patients, where there would be a couple that would be living together and one person is having a lot of pain, and then the other person so much wants to help the other person that they get up and they do everything for them. So I saw this a lot with older couples where they would be like, well, she's in pain, so I'm going to get up and get her water. I'm going to bring her food to her chair. I'm not going to require her to move. And they're really trying to help. It's out of a really good intent, but it's enabling the very thing you don't want to do, which is to decrease that movement. So keeping the person active and moving, if they need a walker or something to help them, but just encourage them to begin to take those initial steps is going to make a difference. The other thing I wanted to bring up, I know it's not exercise, but I do want to make sure we talk a little bit about diet, because there's
Sure.
so much of pain is inflammation, and we want to take down the inflammation. Well, one of the ways that we can take down inflammation is through our diet. And Americans are really not great at having a really good, healthy diet. We eat a lot of stuff. And I also have a background in eating disorders, so I did a lot of specialty work in eating disorders, and so I'm very familiar with dieting and nutrition and all that stuff because my patients were very knowledgeable about all that. But one of the things that we looked at when we were writing the book was, is there a particular type of diet that seems to work better for pain patients than others? And of course, we know that there are some types of diets. And when I say diet, I don't mean like, a restricted eating plan, because I used to say to my patients, any word that has the word die in it, it's probably not good for you. So this is more of a lifestyle plan, a way to eat. But we know that there are certain types of lifestyle eating plans that are good for hypertension patients, good for diabetic patients. And for pain, we looked, and what we found was the Cleveland Clinic uses the Mediterranean diet and really recommends that for their pain patients because it's an anti-inflammatory diet. So while there are lots of great ways to eat, we just kind of settled on the Mediterranean approach with chronic pain patients because we know it's a good diet for helping with inflammation. So that, along with exercise, and I'll put the third one. So I'm always talking about exercise, your what you eat, your diet in terms of what you eat, and then the third one is the biggest one, is sleep and the importance of sleep. And I know when you're in pain, one of the most difficult things I had with those 6 months of that chronic back pain before they figured out what was going on and I actually got into something that really helped. I couldn't sleep because I just couldn't get comfortable because the pain was so intense. And then that when you don't sleep, it just increases the pain even more because of what sleep does for you. In a very general sense, sleep is the rebooting of the body at night to help you do better the next day. And when you can't get that in, so I would encourage somebody who's really struggling with pain, with sleep, to get to maybe a sleep specialist, work with somebody who understands sleep hygiene, getting you into a sleep routine where you can calm the body enough, relax the body, do the things that you need to do to sleep. So I think sleep, exercise, and diet are three of the very basic things that we all sort of know about, but we're not really using that as much as we can in terms of helping our pain.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So exercise, diet, and sleep, the trifecta.
Yeah, the trifecta.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, no, that is very important. And sleep is also part of the recovery process. Both psychological, it's good for both psychological and physical standpoint. Yeah, so that makes sense. Maybe the last thing we could just touch on a little bit is with exercise, like one of the things that we always say to patients, we have, I work with another chiropractor and he makes some of the videos, and when we describe certain exercises, we are constantly telling them, if you are feeling any pain, you should stop. And
Right.
sometimes he says it way too much. In a way, we have a 7-minute video, and he'll say it like 4 times. And I think it's because he understands the idea. It's sensitization, right?
Right.
How important it is for us. It's important for you to exercise, and that's why we always on our channel we give you exercise, we give you stretches that are probably the most safest for your back and your neck and your spine. Like, we're very careful to not recommend you things that might cause you pain. Everyone's still different, and that's why we're constantly telling people, don't push into pain.
Right.
And so maybe, can you talk a little bit about that sensitization and all that?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that because, I was a person who worked out regularly, and I still do as much as I can. It's harder sometimes with my job, but I used to work out a lot, and I would go to the Y, and I did a lot of different types of exercise programs. And they used to say back in the day, no pain, no gain. Well, that's like totally wrong for pain patients because it's exactly what you say. You have to do the movement slowly. carefully. You have to be careful of how you position your body, because we all know that we can just, like you did, you knew, lifting in making that lift, you knew what you were supposed to do, you just didn't do it, and then something happens, and that's easy to have happen. So you do need to pay attention to your body and listen for the cues of maybe you're pushing too much, and make sure that you're doing it slowly. I just like to think of it, exercise has such a negative connotation in my mind because I don't want to have to exercise. It's boring to me to exercise. I want to do things that are movement. So I want to increase my movement, increase my activity. So whether that's trying to throw the ball with a child, that's movement. Whether I'm going on a walk in nature, which has benefits beyond just the exercise, but the environment. We know that if you walk in nature, it's calming and it calms down that nervous system. That's a good thing to do. So getting people to make this more organic in their life is one of the ways that we can really help. Now, it's good to do stretches. I love Pilates classes. I'm a big believer in Pilates, because, again, it was so impactful in my life. And it's just so good to develop strengthen the core of your body, because it helps with posture. It helps with a lot of other things. But I think it's getting the movement in. So getting people to understand, what can you do to move more? Whether that's parking farther in a grocery parking lot, so that I have to make myself walk, since I don't walk in my neighborhood. How can I add movement into my life? And we did a lot of this when I was working with obese patients. And if you have weight to lose, you're going to have more pain as well. So weight loss is another. But boy, I definitely know how hard it is for people to lose weight. This is another really complicated process. But the more you can just increase your movement and get out, because it's going to make a difference in the way your whole body feels. It's all connected. Your body, your mind, your spirit, all of that is all connected together. It's not separated. So it's going to make a difference. But you got to
Yeah.
be careful. Be careful. And if you're really somebody that came off of a major surgery or something, I would get someone who's knowledgeable, very knowledgeable about exercise. And that's why I used to use exercise physiologists in some of my programs, because they were very careful with what was going on. So you might want to think about that if you're really have had some debilitating things happen.
Yeah. Like for example, we don't recommend people to do sit-ups and like flexing exercises for the core, because
Mhm.
most people, especially if they're bulging herniated discs, it's just not good for their
Right.
situation. So we always focus on neutral pelvic planks, bird dogs, dead bugs. Those are the favorite recommendations that we give to people to work on their core. Because there's so many different exercises, but you have to really also know what is the safest for you,
Right.
for your back, that a lot of people don't think about, or even for your discs. I think that's where a lot of people don't think about, even doctors. And that's why we kind of do what we do. And people come to us for those kinds of things. One other things I'll just quickly say is what you said about walking. I think that is something a lot of people don't think about.
Mhm.
Walking is just walking in itself. And we also did an article and a video on this. Is a great exercise that you could do, first of all, at your own pace. So you
Right.
don't have to go for a crazy amount of distance. You could just go for a little bit. But the great thing about walking is it engages your hamstring, glutes, your calves, your core as well.
Mhm.
And you're outside, so it's also good for the psychological health. So it's like that exercise that is right there engaging so many different muscles as well, like, so that even that can be a good exercise for someone.
And get good shoes. So my husband
Yeah.
has problems with one of his knees, because he was a college soccer player, and he got a lot of banging onto his legs and his knees and his ankles. His ankles aren't. And so we walk almost every day, at least 3 miles. That's what we try to do. But he was having so much pain, it was very difficult. So we actually got some good shoes and some inserts that really made a difference. So sometimes you have to think about that. What can I do to make it a more pleasant experience? And for some people, putting on headphones and having music is another distraction of the brain, and it doesn't get you so focused on your body. I think a lot more people can walk than can run. I hate running. I did it, tried to do it. I kept thinking, well, one of these days I'll get that runner's high. And I hated it my whole life, but I love to walk. And when I'm in a city, I get energized by walking. When I go to New York City, I am walking all over Manhattan, up and down, up and down. You know, when I was in Rome, I walked 11 miles in one day in Rome. Because I was so fascinated by the things I was seeing and where we were going and all the things that we did. So again, if you have to distract your brain a little bit with music or something, a podcast, listen to your podcast while you're walking. You'll be doing it, and it will be much more enjoyable because you won't be just thinking, oh, I have to do this. It hurts. You know, I'm making myself. You got to get out of that mindset.
Yeah, that's great advice, to basically still find what you like to do. That's
Right.
still very important. Yeah. All right. I think, yeah, we pretty much covered everything I wanted and more. And if people want to get more stuff, I mean, you can check out her book again, Living Beyond Pain. It's available on Amazon as well as on your website, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
Well,
Uh, and can you tell people where they can learn more about you or plug anything you'd like?
yeah, I mean, the book Living Beyond Pain, it's gotten really good critical reviews, so we're real happy about that. It came out right before COVID, so I was just on national television doing it, and then everything got shut down. So we're going to have to revive our campaign again and try to get out there again. Speaking at a lot of conferences, I had a lot of conference speaking, pain conferences, you know, that kind of thing, and then everything shut down. So, and we know that a lot of people got worse with their pain during COVID, much more sedentary, you know, a lot of more addictive kind of behaviors going on with things. So, and depression worsened, all of these things got worse. So we really need to get people back on there. So yes, and if you forget, my name is Dr. Linda Mintle. That's my website. It's Mintle like mint and then LE. So like Mintle, not mental. Kids used to say, I'm seeing Dr. Mental. I'm like, no, it's Mintle. It's an old joke, right? But it's just Dr. Linda, Linda, Mintle, Mintle.com. And I've got books there. I've got blogs. I've got all kinds of stuff that I do on that. I have a podcast as well and things that I do. So that's a great way to
Awesome.
check it out. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. And again, thank you for being here. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining us on this conversation.